Christianity began as a religion on the fringes. It did not begin as an institutional religion like we know Christianity. It did not begin with official beliefs. It did not begin with a hierarchy of officials like priests and ordained ministers and denominational officers. It did not begin with church buildings and denominational office buildings. As far as we can tell, Christianity began with small groups of people in general meeting in people's houses. And Christianity began with most of society being opposed to it. Christianity was not well received by the powers that be in society. We see that in the Gospels and in the New Testament itself, where the Jews were vehemently against Christians, killed Christians, persecuted Christians, put them in prison. As time moves on, we see the Roman government doing the same thing. So Christianity was a religion that was outside the establishment. If you were a Christian, you were a true outsider. And that continued for about the first 300 years of Christian history. But then something happened. The Roman Emperor Constantine became a Christian, and he created what would become known as the Church. Christianity as an institutional religion with official doctrines and an official hierarchy of leaders. And he modeled that church after the structure of the Roman government. And it wasn't long until Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. In just a few years, Christianity went from being under the radar, persecuted, out of the establishment, to being a part of the establishment itself. And this was the beginning of what historians call Christendom. Christendom is a term that denotes Christianity as the dominant religion in a society, and as a result having society itself and government reflect basic Christian values. Christendom, in other words, denotes that part of the world where Christianity is dominant, not only in religion, but also in society. The Christian world, as we might put it. That's what historians call Christendom. And Christendom seemed to work for a while. The Romans used the power of government to try to make all people under their control at least nominally Christian, but the Roman government soon began to decline. One of the few things that survived from ancient Rome, and one of the few things that survived the decline of the Roman Empire, was this church that Constantine had created. It survived the decline of the Roman Empire. And as the Roman Empire declined, this institutional church that Constantine had created took over the rule of Christendom. The institutional church became very powerful after the decline of the Roman Empire. It stepped into that power vacuum that was created when the Roman Empire declined, and it exercised not only religious power, but also social and political power as well. Constantine's church was the replacement for the Roman Empire. It transcended national borders, and it exercised control over most of what we think of as Europe. Now, as the Roman Empire collapsed, a new form of ordering society eventually developed. That's what's called feudalism. And feudalism replaced the way Roman society was ordered, but it was very similar. And of course, since the Roman Catholic Church was modeled on the way the Roman Empire was governed, they found themselves in a very good position in a feudalistic system. It became a major power player in the system of feudalism. At one time, it is said, the Pope was the largest feudal lord in all of Europe. The church became the center of tremendous wealth and power. Even when the feudal system ended during the Protestant Reformation and the Renaissance periods, still Christendom remained. The difference was that Christendom now had a shared government. Some of it was governed by the Roman Catholic, some of it was governed by the Protestant. But all of Europe, all of what we think of as the West, was still under the Christian umbrella of one sort or another. Now, it was out of that kind of Christianity, the Christianity of Christendom, that Christianity, the way we know it, came into being. And that's the way we were taught to look at Christianity. Christendom, when Christianity is the dominant religion of an area, and when Christianity is reflected in society and in government, is how most of us probably grew up looking at Christianity. That's what we thought we lived in. Especially if you grew up around here. Think about how things were when you were growing up. Everything was Christian. And everyone was Christian. If you're at least as old as I am, you can probably remember having Bible readings and prayer every morning in your school class. Everyone who was anyone in Shelby and Cleveland County was an active member of some church. And that's how it had always been. And that's how it should be. Or at least that's how it seemed to us back then. You see, the religious revivals of the 1800s, which are called the Great Awakenings, had established Christianity as a major force in American society. And that led to the great missionary movements of the late 1800s and early 1900s. The aim of those missionary movements was to export not only Christianity to the rest of the world, but also the American way of life, to bring the rest of the world into the fold of Christendom. We see that reflected in hymns of that time. One that I especially remember, and I know a lot of y'all remember this because we used to sing it. We've a story to tell to the nations that shall turn their hearts to the right. And the darkness shall turn to dawning, and the dawning to noonday light. And Christ's great kingdom shall come on earth, the kingdom of love and light. In those heady days of the early 1900s, we were going to bring all people all over the world under the umbrella of Christendom. And in the 1920s through the 1950s were the real glory days of American Christianity. Churches were full all over the country. There was general prosperity. New churches were built. The country was governed both at the state and national level by elected officials, almost all of whom were active members of one of the major American denominations. 90% of all Americans identified themselves as Christian back then. Christendom was a reality. And then it collapsed. Not only did we not export Christendom to the world, Christianity declined and lost importance here in the United States. Christendom was no more. While we may have thought we lived in Christendom back when we were growing up in the late 50s and in the 60s, I don't think anyone is under the illusion that we live in Christendom today. Christendom does no longer exist. Today we stand on the other side of it and we look back on it. When we look back on those years of Christendom, we see many things that were not Christian. And looking back on it now, we can see that Christendom wasn't really a reflection of Christianity anyway. It was just a reflection of institutional religion. We can now see that the Christianity of Christendom was little more than a veneer laid on top of a society that was in reality no more Christian than any other society. During our lifetimes, the veneer of the Christianity of Christendom was stripped off. It wasn't actually stripped off. It was thrown off and rejected. The veneer started being rejected a long time ago, but we didn't realize it. Today the veneer is completely gone and we have no choice but to recognize it. But you know, even though it was just a veneer on top of society, even that veneer had some effect at mollifying the bad influences within people. Even just that veneer of Christianity had some effect at making people just a little more honest, just a little more moral. It brought at least a modicum of honesty, morality, and decency to society. But today, with that veneer gone, that modicum of honesty, decency, and principles itself seems to be fading away today. People are rejecting Christianity today, simply rejecting it. Churches are dying as the older generations die out, and the younger generations want nothing to do with Christianity. The various Christian denominations have tried to adapt themselves and have contorted themselves in pitiful attempts to make themselves relevant. The major Christian denominations have shown there is nothing they will not change, nothing they will not give up, nothing they will not turn their backs on in an effort to get people to pay them attention again. The new religion of our time is science. While we may not think of science as a religion, that's what it has become. It's not that people today are leaving Christianity and going to Buddhism or Hinduism or something like that. They're leaving Christianity for science. That is the number one reason people give for leaving Christianity, is that it is incompatible with science. Science today is where people put their ultimate trust. Science is what people look to. Organized Christianity realized that a long time ago, and its response was to try to accommodate itself to science, to jettison anything that Scripture says that is non-scientific. Don't worry, we'll get rid of it, we'll get rid of it, we'll get rid of it. That's what they said. When they did that, they nailed their own coffin shut. There has been nothing more destructive of Christianity in recent centuries than when organized Christianity stepped off the floor and yielded the floor to science, when organized Christianity stepped back, put their head down, and let science take the forefront, when organized Christianity modified its beliefs in an attempt to make itself compatible with science. Organized Christianity not only tried to accommodate itself to science, it has tried to accommodate itself to every single trend that has swept through society. But all that has not helped. It has only accelerated the decline. It made people realize that organized Christianity has no principles, but will go along with anything just to get warm bodies for a Sunday service. And that's not really religion. In our lifetimes, we have seen the end of Christendom, and as a result, we are witnessing Christianity going back today to what it originally was. We are witnessing Christianity going back to its roots. A movement outside the mainstream, marching to a beat of a different drum than society. You see, today, if you are a Christian, you are an outsider. You are an outsider not only in society, but you are an outsider in relation to organized denominational Christianity. And that's something that Wanda and I recognized over 10 years ago. And it's why the Chapel of Christ exists today. We decided to separate ourselves from denominational Christianity and do something different. People are leaving organized Christianity in droves. Some are doing that because they are rejecting Christianity. Others are doing that because they're not rejecting Christianity, they're just rejecting institutional Christianity. And that's the category we fit in. We did not reject Christianity, but we did reject institutional Christianity. And the Chapel of Christ was born. The idea for the Chapel of Christ came out of experiences we had had in other churches. One of the things we had experienced in other churches was that so much of church was about the building. Maintaining the building. Building a new building. Always something to be done with the building. Wanda and I had left a church and a denomination in which the church itself had imploded, 95% due to a building they built. And then I went to a church to do my internship, and guess what? They were fixing to build a building. And I told that minister there when I went there, I said, I want nothing to do with anything about that building, because I have seen how we just got out of a church that imploded over a building. So he kept me away from everything about that building that they were building, and I'm thankful for it. Now, another thing we had experienced was the constant begging for money. Always want you to give money for this, that, or the other. And it was never enough. It was not just one thing. It was 5 or 6 different things. And no matter how much people gave, they never had enough. And then there was always another committee meeting. Another different service to attend. And want you to come and do this, that, and the other. The building, the begging for money, and always trying to get you to do something. That's what church seemed all about. And we also had bad experiences in churches getting involved in politics. Being swept along with whatever was the current news cycle of the day. All that turned us off, and we noticed how it turned others off too. And then we finally reached the point where we could no longer in good conscience be a part of denominational Christianity. We saw the major denominations in theological chaos. We saw them espousing beliefs and positions we could not agree with. And finally we decided we could not be associated with. We had just seen too much from denominational offices and denominational officials. We eventually realized that what all that was not Christianity. It was just church. Church as an institutional religion. And I realized it was not church that I felt called to when I felt God's call to ministry. I felt called to the gospel of Jesus Christ, not to church. And so the question came to me, how can I preach the gospel if I am unwilling to live it in my own life? One of the things that sticks out to me the most is something that happened right as my seminary career was wrapping up and right as my internship in Cherville was wrapping up. I went to a Presbyterian seminary and I was doing my internship at First Presbyterian Church in Cherville, where we met some of the nicest and most dear people, and we just, like you talk about fitting, the glove fit at that church. It was a wonderful experience. Now at that time, the Presbyterian denomination was involved in controversy about certain moral issues. So much so that many churches in that denomination were feeling they could no longer in good conscience stay in that denomination. And so a movement began to form a new denomination so that these churches could leave the present denomination and go to that one. And the structure of that new denomination got established, and they had a website. And one day I went to their website, and when you went to their website, typed in their address, and boom, what popped up at you? It was a statement saying that if you're a pastor in this denomination over here, and if you leave this denomination and come to our denomination, you won't lose your retirement benefits. That's what was on their webpage. And I sat there and I looked at that. And I got an ominous feeling. Here was a new denomination that was just starting out. And if you went to their webpage, the first thing you saw was something assuring you that if you're a minister and your church goes to this denomination, you won't lose your retirement. Keep in mind that this denomination was formed because many people felt the present denomination was going in such wrong directions that they could not in good conscience be associated with it. But it occurred to me that if these people really felt the denomination was going in directions they could not support, and the only reason they stayed was their retirement benefits, what in the world did that say about them? What did it say about their principles? If you are a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, can you associate yourself with something you deem absolutely not Christian just because of retirement benefits? And as I sat there, I realized something. The main problem in that denomination was not anything to do with the positions they had taken on social and political issues. The real problem in that denomination was that they had pastors who believed the denomination was going in the wrong direction, yet they valued their retirement benefits more than they valued their principles. And that indicated to me a much deeper problem than just a wrong position on a moral issue. There was a cancer inside there that went to the core. I just did not single out that one denomination, though. As I looked into others, I found the same thing. And so one day I came up with the idea that we would break free from all that. We would leave the security of a good salary, paid health insurance, great benefits, and retirement benefits. And we would step out on faith, take a leap of faith, and start something not connected with any denomination, the Chapel of Christ. It would be a place where you could come on a Sunday morning, and that's all we wanted it to be. A place where you could come on Sunday morning. We decided we would never own a building, so that our ministry would never be about a building. We decided we would never ask for money. We would operate on what people freely gave on their own, and I vowed never to become involved in political issues. And so we rented this space. We did not know the Burtons before we rented this space. But as we were talking about doing this, we both agreed there was only one place we felt we could do it, and that would be here. And so we approached the Burtons. For 3 months we heard nothing, and we just assumed they were not going to let us use this space. But then one day the phone rang, and it was them, and they said yes, they had decided to do it. And so on January 22nd, 2012, the Chapel of Christ had its first service. And it was a total leap of faith. We did not know if when we started this, if anybody would come in here. But they did. Some of you have been here since that very first Sunday. Some of you have come since. We envisioned this place simply as one thing, to be where you could come if you wanted to come. Whether you wanted to come every Sunday from now on, or whether you just wanted to come for a few weeks and then move on, that's fine. We would welcome all who came. There would be no requirements and no commitments. There would be no requirements that you even had to be a Christian. We would ask for nothing. We would simply be here for those who wanted to come. You see, unlike most churches, the Chapel of Christ is not a building on a plot of land. That's not what the Chapel of Christ is. The Chapel of Christ is a ministry of providing the opportunity for people to hear the good news of Jesus Christ or whatever they need out of what we do. And that is independent of the space that it is done in. That is independent of where it is located. Our church is not a building on this land. It is not tied to any certain place. I don't think any of us realize this. I didn't realize this when the idea came to us, and I don't know whether y'all realize it, but you're on the cutting edge of Christianity, because this is the future of Christianity. The denominational churches and the denominations themselves are dying. Just look at the churches in Shelby. Every one of them's declining. Every one of them. Even the ones we thought were powerhouses. They got these humongous buildings. They've got a handful of people sitting in them, and the only reason they're making ends meet now is because they've either had some rich people die and leave them money, or they got some rich people there that have given them a bunch of money just so the church won't close. But that's not a sustainable thing. They have big buildings, but fewer and fewer people, and those buildings are albatrosses around their necks. People are deserting the denominational churches, and I believe that will not only continue, I believe it will accelerate. The future of Christianity in the United States is this right here. Small groups, not tied to a denomination and not tied to any certain building.